All right, so today we're going to start with our next chunk of the Twits. The last time that we read together, we got to hear about the Twits and their monkey cage and the horrible things that Mr. Twit would make those poor monkeys do, standing on their head for 6 hours and having to do everything while being upside down, like even eating. And so the monkeys in their miserable life also felt really bad for those poor birds that would get stuck in the big dead tree every Wednesday with that hug-tight glue. And when their friend the roly-poly bird from Africa came to visit and he was able to communicate with the birds, he was able to warn them not to land in the tree, and then Mr. and Mrs. Twit did not get their bird pie. It's happened 2 nights in a row now, and they're fed up. And the beginning of the title of today's chapter that we will begin with is called Mr. and Mrs. Twit Go Off to Buy Guns. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket, not a single bird was sitting on either the monkey cage or the big dead tree. They were all happily perched on the roof of Mr. Twit's house. The roly-poly bird was up there as well, and the monkeys were in the cage, and the whole lot of them were hooting with laughter at Mr. Twit. That's a lot of birds to have up at the top of your house. I'm sure it just made Mr. Twit upset. "Huh! I'll wipe that silly laugh off your beaks," he screamed at the birds. "I'll get you next time, you filthy feathery frumps. I'll wring your necks, the whole lot of you, and have you bubbling in the pot for bird pie before this day is out." "How are you going to do that?" asked Mrs. Twit, who had come inside to see what all the noise was about. "I won't have you smearing sticky glue all over the roof of our house." Mr. Twit went very close to Mrs. Twit, and he lowered his voice so that neither the birds nor the monkey should hear. "I have a great idea," he said. "We'll both go into town right away, and we'll buy a gun each. How's that?" "Brilliant!" cried Mrs. Twit, grinning and showing her long yellow teeth. "We'll buy those shotguns that spray out 50 bullets or more with each bang." "Exactly," said Mr. Twit. "Lock up the house while I go, and make sure the monkeys are safely shut away." Mr. Twit went over to the monkey cage. "Attention!" he barked in his fearsome monkey trainer voice. "Upside down, all of you, and jump to it. One on top of the other. Quick, get on with it, or you'll feel Mrs. Twit stick across your backsides." Obediently, the poor monkeys stood on their hands and clambered one on top of the other, with Muggle One at the bottom and the smallest child at the very top. "Now stay there till we come back," Mr. Twit ordered. "Don't you dare move, and don't overbalance. When we return in 2 or 3 hours' time, I shall expect to find you all in exactly the same positions as you are now. Understand?" With that, Mr. Twit marched away. Mrs. Twit went with him, and the monkeys were left alone with the birds. But the next chapter is called Muggle One Has an Idea. As soon as Mr. and Mrs. Twit had disappeared down the road, the monkeys all flipped back onto their feet the right way up. "Quick, get the key!" Muggle One called out to the roly-poly bird, who was still sitting on the roof of the house. "What key?" shouted the roly-poly bird. "The key to the door of our cage," cried Muggle One. "It's hanging on a nail in the work shed. That's where he always puts it." The roly-poly bird flew down and came back with the key in his beak. Muggle Wump reached a hand through the bars of the cage and took the key. He put it in the lock and opened it. All 4 monkeys leapt out together. "We are free!" cried the 2 little ones. "Where shall we go, Dad? Where shall we hide?" "Don't get excited," said Muggle Wump. "Calm down, everybody. Before we escape from this beastly place, we have one very, very important thing to do." "What?" they asked him. "We are going to turn those terrible Twits upside down." "We're going to do what?" they cried. "You must be joking, Dad." "I'm not joking," Muggle Wump said. "We're going to turn both Mr. and Mrs. Twit upside down with their legs in the air." "Don't be ridiculous," said the roly-poly bird. "How can we possibly turn those 2 maggoty old monsters upside down?" We can, cried Muggle One. We're going to make them stand on their heads for hours and hours, perhaps forever. Let them see what it feels like for a change. How? Said the roly-poly bird. Just tell me how. Muggle-Wump laid his head on one side, and a tiny twinkly little smile touched the corners of his mouth. Now and again, he said, but not very often. I have a brilliant idea. This is one of them. Follow me, my friends, follow me. He scampered off toward the house, and the 3 other monkeys and the roly-poly bird went after him. Buckets and paintbrushes, cried Muggle-Wump. That's what we want next. There are plenty in the work shed. Hurry up, everyone. Get a bucket and a paintbrush. Inside Mr. Twit's work shed, there was an enormous barrel of hug-tight sticky glue, the stuff he used for catching birds. Fill your buckets, Muggle-Wump ordered. We are now going into the big house. Mrs. Twit had hidden the key to the front door under the doormat, and Muggle-Wump had seen her doing it, so it was easy for them to get in. In they went, all 4 monkeys with their buckets of sticky glue. Then came the roly-poly bird, flying in after them, with a bucket in his beak and a brush in his claw. What do you think they're going to do with buckets of glue and paintbrushes? And how does that connect with putting the Twits upside down? Be thinking about that. Maybe be drawing a picture about that today. This will be a really great one for pictures. The next chapter is called The Great Glue Painting Begins. This is the living room, announced Muggle-Wump. The grand and glorious living room where those 2 fearful, frumpish freaks eat bird pie every week for supper. Please don't mention bird pie again, said the roly-poly bird. It gives me the shudders. We mustn't waste time, cried Muggle-Wump. Hurry up. Now the first thing is this. I want everyone to paint sticky glue all over the ceiling. Cover it all. Smear it in every corner. Over the ceiling, they cried. Why the ceiling? Never mind why, shouted Muggle-Wump. Just do as you're told and don't argue. But how do we get up there? They asked. We can't reach. Monkeys can reach everywhere, shouted Muggle-Wump. He was in a frenzy of excitement now, waving his paintbrush and his bucket and leaping all over the room. Come on, jump on the table, stand on the chairs, hop on each other's shoulders. Don't stand there gaping. We have to hurry, don't you understand that? Those terrible Twits will be back any moment, and this time they'll have guns. Get on with it, for heaven's sake, get on with it. And so, the great glue painting of the ceiling began. All the other birds who had been sitting on the roof flew in to help, carrying paintbrushes in their claws and beaks. There were buzzards, wild ducks, woodpeckers, magpies, rooks, ravens, and many more. Everyone was splashing away like mad, and with so many helpers, the job was soon finished. So now that they've painted this glue on the ceiling, I'm still not quite sure how it all connects together. Let's see if the next chapter helps us. It's called The Carpet Goes on the Ceiling. What now? They all said, looking at Muggle-Wump. Aha! Cried Muggle-Wump. Now for the fun. Now for the greatest upside-down trick of all time. Are you ready? We're ready, said the monkeys. We're ready, said the birds. Pull out the carpet, shouted Muggle-Wump. Pull this huge carpet out from under the furniture and stick it onto the ceiling. Onto the ceiling, cried one of the small monkeys. But that's impossible, Dad. I'll stick you on the ceiling if you don't hush up, snapped Muggle-Wump. He's dotty, they cried. He's balmy. He's batty. He's nutty. He's screwy. He's wacky, cried the roly-poly bird. Poor old Muggles has gone off his wump at last. Oh, do stop shouting such rubbish and give me a hand, said Muggle-Wump, catching hold of one of the corners of the carpet. Now pull, you nitwits, pull! The carpet was enormous. It covered the entire floor from wall to wall. It had a red and gold pattern on it. It was not easy to pull an enormous carpet off the floor when the room was full of tables and chairs. Pull, yelled Muggle One. Pull, pull, pull. He was like a demon hopping around the room telling everybody what to do. But you couldn't blame him. After months and months of standing on his head with his family, he couldn't wait for the time when the terrible Twits would be doing the same thing. At least that's what he hoped. With the monkeys and the birds all pulling and puffing, the carpet was dragged off the floor and finally hoisted up onto the ceiling. And there it stuck. All at once, the whole ceiling of the living room was carpeted in red and gold. So, they have the carpet on the top of the ceiling. Do you think they're trying to flip the whole room around? Is the carpet going to be enough? Or are they going to have to put something else up there? What else would they need to be able to trick the Twits? Well, I think I'll read one more chapter for you today. And this last chapter is called The Furniture Goes Up. Now the table! The big table, shouted Muggle One. Turn the table upside down and put a dollop of sticky glue onto the bottom of each leg. Then we shall stick that onto the ceiling as well. Now, hoisting that huge table upside down onto the ceiling was not an easy job, but they managed it in the end. Will it stay there, they cried. Is the glue strong enough to hold it up? It's the strongest glue in the world, Muggle One replied. It's the special bird-killing glue for smearing on trees. Please, said the roly-poly bird, I have asked you before not to mention that subject. How would you like it if it was a monkey pie they made every Wednesday and all your friends had been boiled up and you went on talking about it? I do beg your pardon, said Muggle One. I'm so excited I hardly know what I'm saying. Now the chairs! Do the same with the chairs! All the chairs must be stuck upside down to the ceiling and in their right places. Oh, do hurry up, everybody. Any moment now, those two filthy freaks are going to come running in with their guns. The monkeys, with the birds helping them, put glue on the bottom of each chair leg and hoisted them up to the ceiling. Now the smaller table, shouted Muggle One, and the big sofa, and the sideboard, and the lamps, and the tiny little things, the ashtray, the ornaments, that beastly plastic gnome on the sideboard. Absolutely everything must be stuck to the ceiling. It was terribly hard work. It was especially difficult to stick everything onto the ceiling in exactly its right place, but they got it done in the end. What now? Asked the roly-poly bird. He was out of breath and so tired he could hardly flap his wings. Now the pictures, cried Muggle One. Turn all the pictures upside down. And will one of you birds please fly out onto the road and watch to see when those frumptious freaks are coming back? I'll go, said the roly-poly bird. I'll sit on the telephone wires and keep guard. It will give me a rest. I mean, look how giant that sofa was, poor guy. They had to haul that up onto the ceiling. That would have been hard work. Well, we'll stop there for the day. I wonder if the roly-poly bird was able to catch the Twits in time, or if they're going to come bursting in before he even gets out to the road. And will Muggle One's trick work? We'll have to find out and see in our next video. See you then.